Hello and a very warm welcome. I'm Kabir Naqvi. You're watching News 9 Live. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin welcomed Chinese leader Xi Jinping to the Kremlin, sending a powerful message to the Western leaders that their efforts to isolate Moscow over the fighting in Ukraine have maybe fallen short. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping's trip, his first abroad since his re-election earlier this month, showed off Beijing's new diplomatic swagger and gave a political lift to Vladimir Putin just days after an international arrest warrant was issued for the Kremlin leader on war crimes and the charges related to the onslaught in Ukraine. The two major powers have described Xi's trip as an opportunity to deepen their no-limits friendship. Now, China looks at Russia as a source of oil and gas for its energy, hungry economy, and as a partner in standing up to what both see as United States' aggression, domination of global affairs, and unfair punishment for their human rights records. The two countries, Russia and China, among the 5 UN Security Council's permanent members, also have held joint military drills, and United States officials have picked up indications that China is considering supplying Russia with weapons for its fight in Ukraine, but have seen no evidence actually so far. But that's not all. The Kremlin has also welcomed China's peace plan, while the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that any proposal that left Russian forces in Ukraine after a quote-unquote ceasefire would merely let Moscow re-equip and otherwise regain strength to resume its offensive. But 13 months into the war, what is going on in the mind of Vladimir Putin? Can Xi and Putin afford to continue scratching each other's backs? Watch our docu-series only on the News 9 Plus app. You can also download the application by scanning the QR code on your screens. The third episode, Riding a Tiger, is now out. We'll speak to the man behind the episode, but first, here's a snippet.
Can Vladimir Putin sustain his aggressive posture? What is his Ukraine endgame? With the world taking on the Russian bully, is Putin on the back foot?
Клянусь при осуществлении полномочий президента Российской Федерации.
Is he riding a tiger? A keen follower of geopolitics will realize that Putin's ambitions have truly gone global in the past 8 years. The Syrian campaign, sea exercises with China around Japan, Russian private military contractor Wagner Group's expanding presence in Africa. The Russian sphere of influence is not just restricted to cultural geography, but also an expanded geopolitical influence.
From the Russian point of view and Mr. Putin's Russian point of view, he has restored the confidence of Russia. He has given them again a sense of destiny.
Putin has carefully built an alliance of convenience with another leader with global ambitions.
Putin is not alone. He has the most powerful support of the People's Republic of China.
Xi Jinping is on a similar path of expanding Chinese influence. The West is their common enemy, and therefore joining hands makes sense for the dictators who want to rule for life.
Putin and Xi Jinping actually has very much alike. They are all leaders growing from the lower. And the second is that they have the similar situations.
Both leaders believe that their interests converge, and Russia's military efficiency, coupled with China's deep pockets, can create a supreme military and economic bloc.
Now these two dictators in the East now have to stretch each other's back. So they have shared some comradeship to help each other all together.
Well, now, fascinating visuals and insights, weren't they? You can download the application on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store as well. News 9 Plus, a lot more other cutting-edge documentaries for your disposal as well. Well, joining us in the studio is the man behind the third episode, Riding a Tiger, Justin Thomas, a news editor for News 9 Plus. Many thanks for joining us. And also joining us on the broadcast is Major General Sudhakar G, recipient of the VSM, who's a defense and geopolitics expert as well. Always a pleasure to have you with us on the broadcast. Justin, let's get the ball rolling. You know, I mentioned that there were really fascinating visuals and really fascinating insights as well. But more importantly, riding a tiger, where does that particular reference come from?
Riding a tiger for Putin out here is that the challenge that they face is obviously the West is totally now against it. All the economic sanctions that are being hampering. So the challenge that Putin is facing is to find a strong ally who can support it financially. That's the main important part. And here comes China, that is, you know, again, a similar dictator based out of China is also facing challenges from the West, the NATO, the US, and the different military agreements by the West. So in this condition, they have to come together to form an ally. So they are not formally a military ally, but there's an understanding, clear understanding that we both have to stand together, we both have to work together to counter any pressure from the West, because there's no scope of, after this war, there's no scope of rebuilding ties, which are going to take time. So in a sense, both are in a situation where they are trying to get out and get a profitable partnership happening, but at the same time protecting their own interests.
All right, fair enough. Let's cut across to Mr. Sudhakar. Do you echo with what Justin is telling us here? You know, riding a tiger. Take a look at what's happening in the current geopolitical scenario as well. Fumio Kishida was in India. He's on his way en route Ukraine. Xi Jinping, he's in Moscow for the next 3 days. Major, you know, power blocks are now turning towards the Indo-Pacific. Do you agree with this particular point that Indo-Pacific is now as crucial on the global stage as the other Western power blocks?
Well, Kabir, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to your channel. I totally agree with what Mr. Justin has articulated. But the point that you were raising, you see, Indo-Pacific, in any case, when there was a hasty withdrawal of US or the Western forces from Afghanistan, to everyone's mind, there was a big question as to why are they doing what they are doing? Does a superpower withdraw in this hasty manner? Or there is something dangerous which is happening and making them to recoil? At that point in time, things had taken time to actually crystallize. And they had clearly indicated that the pivot of Asia, or say Western Alliance pivot, willy-nilly is shifting to Indo-Pacific, because they had by then declared China as a #1 enemy, global enemy, and China was to be contained. That was the primary aim of having shifted to Indo-Pacific. But unfortunately, all the resources and efforts have got dragged in to Central Europe, wherein the Ukraine war has actually gone beyond 1 year now. So having said that, all I would say is that the global order is changing because of very landmark events which have taken place in 21st century. The first one, I think I shared in your channel, maybe some other channel, is the Lehman Brothers crisis in 2008, which is the biggest challenge that has actually come the way of global order. The second one, to my understanding, is the pandemic. The COVID pandemic having lasted, it is still continuing. And the global order has not been able to pinpoint, or at least for the sake of accountability, unless you find the cause or the reason, how can you find an answer so that it can be prevented in future? Third and most important thing which has happened is that Russia has invaded Ukraine, Ukraine being a pro, or I would say aspiring ally of NATO. It's a big thing which is happening in the face of the NATO forces having come together. And last but not the least is that the Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, they have given a clear indication here, the Shias and Sunnis, after a long conflict, historic conflict of 1400 long years, they have decided to actually exchange on diplomatic missions. That's a big thing happening in the Middle West, and so is Iran and Iraq. They've given clear indications of going in for peace and harmony, and so is the case with Syria. So Middle East is undergoing change. Russia has come onto the lap of China. China, with its $19.8 trillion economy, is of course throwing its weight around. So let's wait and watch which side does it go. In my assessment, this is just a temporary shift to Indo-Pacific. Western alliance will continue to bleed Russia out in Ukraine itself, like the way they had done in Afghanistan. Until that happens, this conflict will carry on despite all peace and harmonious overtures by Xi Jinping, which is being thrown or offered presently during his visit to Moscow. Back to you, Kabir.
So absolutely. Just to add to that, the peace overtures that sir is talking about, what exactly does that peace overtures means? Out here for China and for Russia is that a status quo is agreed upon, which the West will not agree to. Because status quo, which means that Russia will hold on to the territory that Ukraine they have got already, which is almost like 17 to 18%. So they will be totally opposed to it. US has already made it clear that we will not stand for any sort of status quo agreement on that. Anything less than pullback is not acceptable for the US and the allies. So clearly, even if the peace process that Xi is trying to bring forward has anything less than that, it's going to fail.
Well, absolutely. Yesterday, there was apparently a 4-hour-long discussion in Kremlin between the Chinese president after his third unprecedented term. And the optics are such, nobody's ready to stick their neck out and say it. But it looks like Vladimir Putin is an isolated character. So given that particular situation, you've got the Chinese president giving Vladimir Putin a visit, 4 hours long of discussion that happened yesterday over dinner. Today, some formal talks are also going to be held. The Ukraine peace deal is also likely on the cards. But let's quickly take a look at a reaction coming from Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin.
China attaches great importance to the China-Russia relations, and there are historical logics behind this. Because we are each other's biggest neighboring country as well as strategic partners, this determines that we have a very close relationship with each other.
Of course, we will have the opportunity to discuss this issue. We know that you proceed from the principles of justice and observance of the fundamental provisions of international law, of indivisible security for all countries. You are also aware that we are always open to the negotiation process. We will discuss, of course, all these issues, including your initiative, which we treat with respect, of course. In general, our interaction in the international arena, of course, contributes to the strengthening of the fundamental principles of the world order and multipolarity.
But now, Mr. Zakir, for the United States, nothing but a pullback will do. But on the other hand, the kind of dream that Vladimir Putin is trying to actualize, a sense of hope and destiny that he has provided to the Russians as well. The first thing Xi Jinping said after, reaching Kremlin was that, I'm sure you're going to be elected next year as well. So from the Baltic in the west to the Pacific in the east, the kind of dream that Vladimir Putin has of, reviving the Imperial Russian Empire, don't you think that's also a status quo that Vladimir Putin is, that's going inside Vladimir Putin's mind?
Yeah, Kabir, I must compliment you. Very, very brilliant question you have asked, actually. Incidentally, I'm not Mr. I'm Major General Sudhakarji. So you may address me, prefix my name with my rank. It will be very nice. Okay, coming back to the question.
Well, apologies for that, Major General.
No issue, no issue. The question which you have raised, we need to understand our viewers through your channel. I must compliment your channel. You have a large viewership, by the way, and it's going live. I didn't know. Last time, before our program could finish, I had started, my mobile was flooded with a lot of inputs. All I would say is that to respond to a situation as obtaining on ground today, people need to understand what has led Russia to invade Ukraine. There must have been a cause and effect. We need to understand the cause and effect. If NATO came about in 1949 with 12 founding members, and by 2022 they had 30 members, despite an assurance given by none other than James Baker, way back in 1990, if I recall correctly, in February, to none other than Mikhail Gorbachev, that the collapse of Berlin Wall was giving a guarantee that not an inch of expansion of East Europe would take place. This is not just by a word of mouth, it is there in a white paper. So despite that assurance, although West continues to deny the same, how is that the number of members of the NATO, and what is the relevance of NATO after 1991? If Warsaw has got dissolved, then I don't feel that the European security architecture should have been revisited. They should have created an architecture which was accepted by both the Russia as also the European Union or the NATO forces. Why hasn't that happened? Why have they continuously in an incremental manner, they have crawled forward to the eastern part of the Eastern Europe, despite having given an assurance that it will not happen? That has happened. That perhaps, in fact, let me also tell the viewers that none other than Putin himself in the year 2000, he has indicated that he was keen that Russia should become a member of NATO. It is there in many major documents. But after that, in the year 2008, he had to draw the red line. He told none other than, I think, George Bush, and he told him, please do not, Ukraine is the red line. You have gone enough. In the year 2004, there are 7 countries which have joined, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and 3 other countries. 7 countries became NATO members. When a thing like this is happening on the face of it, if you want to draw any parallel, if something like this happens towards our southern part of India, let's say Sri Lanka, will India ever accept a thing like this? I don't think so. So therefore, peripheral security, it may appear to be others, but it is the existential threat of Russia, which once upon a time also enjoyed the status of a superpower. You cannot actually diminish a superpower into such a diminutive kind of a size, which hurts the self-esteem and ego of a nation state. A nation state also is a breathing organization. It's a living organization. It's living on some kind of a ego and self-esteem and self-respect. A nation state as big as Russia, which has got 1,600 nuclear missiles, you can't reduce it to a non-accountable non-entity in the global order. So therefore, I think to my mind, what Putin has done and what he is doing is as per his requirement and aspiration of the people. They have got 17% of the total land area, which is under their occupation, contrary to 35% last year at the beginning of the conflict. Now it has come down to 17%. I don't think, as per my assessment and understanding, he will budge in any kind of negotiation. They will hold firm and on the defensible features so as to have an open and trafficable land bridge with Crimea. And Crimea is not going to be compromised by Russia at any cost, no matter what Joe Biden says, no matter what the Western alliances say. In my understanding also, let me also clarify that it's just a matter of time. Joe Biden and Western alliances, they will also buckle under pressure. They will come on the knees because of high inflation, rise in the energy prices, as also the cost of living of the general population is going up by the day. Therefore, there is going to be a cumulative impact as far as the public uprising is concerned. For all you know, in times ahead, in couple of months ahead from now, things may be turning very ugly against the Western alliance. Back to
Absolutely.
you.
I mean, it seems like Vladimir Putin was always ready for the kind of sanctions that were coming there. When even if Russia was not ready for the sanctions, it doesn't look like to be having a major impact on the kind of offenses we can see already with the Wagner group in the Eastern Front with Ukraine as well. But the chills, like Major General was talking about, Justin, are being felt in the White House over there as well. Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, there's a reaction coming from him. Let's quickly take a look at that and then we'll move forward.
President Xi is meeting with President Putin in Russia. We expect that China may use this visit to reiterate calls for a ceasefire under its peace proposal. The United States welcomes any initiative that advances a just and durable peace. China's proposal includes elements that we have long supported, including ensuring nuclear safety, resolving the humanitarian crisis, protecting civilians, and indeed, the first element calls for upholding sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of all countries.
Now, Justin, I mean, looking forward to the situation, why does a peace deal, a proposed probable peace deal that China might put on the table, is ringing alarm bells for the United States?
See, US historically has been the numero uno policeman of the world, all right? Wherever there was a conflict, they used to step in, try to mediate, or obviously get into the war. So here's China, who has just about a few weeks back mediated a so-called deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So that shows that China's growing stature in the world. And that is worrying for US, because US always believed in a policy that there cannot be a competition at the top. They are the number one, and any competition is between the second, third, fourth. So they are the supreme country of the world. But that is being challenged by China primarily because of their economic power. So here in the Russia situation, where Biden went to Kiev just after around the 1-year war anniversary, walked on the streets of Kiev, showing off the world that, hey, we are here, we are going to ensure that there is some kind of peace that is going to happen very soon, either militarily or by negotiations. But then China fits in, okay, pushes it out and says that, no, listen, we also have a plan, and we can also ensure that this war doesn't continue, because the war also for China is not a profitable issue, because at the end of the day Russia is going to put their resources into this war, and that will deplete the support that they require militarily from Russia. So they are ensuring that they are coming to the playground, saying that we will help the negotiations. So this is definitely what US used to do everywhere. So that's why they are worried. They know that if China is allowed to step in again, this will be the end of their regime, their influence across the world, which is being divided into north and the south of the world. So north, where it's US, south is where Russia and China are, and India are, and right now China is leading the charge against US.
Well, it seems like unofficial power blocks are now sort of like spurting out, and we need a revision of the kind of power blocks that we have at our disposal. Folks, our docu-series Inside the Mind of Putin, the episode number 3, Riding a Tiger, is now out there on our applications, News 9 Plus. You can download the applications for other cutting-edge documentaries as well. We'll move further, riveting conversation, gentlemen, but for the viewers out there, a quick snippet of the docu-series.
Can Vladimir Putin sustain his aggressive posture? What is his Ukraine endgame? With the world taking on the Russian bully, is Putin on the back foot?
Клянусь при осуществлении полномочий президента Российской Федерации.
Is he riding a tiger? A keen follower of geopolitics will realize that Putin's ambitions have truly gone global in the past 8 years. The Syrian campaign, sea exercises with China around Japan, Russian private military contractor, Wagner Group's expanding presence in Africa. The Russian sphere of influence is not just restricted to cultural geography, but also an expanded geopolitical influence.
From the Russian point of view and Mr. Putin's Russian point of view, he has restored the confidence of Russia. He has given them again a sense of destiny.
Putin has carefully built an alliance of convenience with another leader with global ambitions.
Putin is not alone. He has the most powerful support of the People's Republic of China.
Xi Jinping is on a similar path of expanding Chinese influence. The West is their common enemy, and therefore joining hands makes sense for the dictators who want to rule for life.
Putin and Xi Jinping actually has very much alike. They are all leaders growing from the lower. And the second is that they have the similar situations.
Both leaders believe that their interests converge, and Russia's military efficiency, coupled with China's deep pockets, can create a supreme military and economic bloc.
So now these two dictators in the East now have to stretch each other's back. So they have shared some comradeship to help each other all together.
Well, my next question to Major General Sudhakar ji. A couple of things that have been made clear at this point in time. Number one, you've got an unofficial bloc that's coming up. Number two, the bonhomie between Russia and China certainly seems to be growing. A no-limit friendship is something that is being spoken about. At the same time, we know that there are jittery movements being made from the Western bloc. Major General, give us a sense of how you're looking at these particular developments. Number one, Fumio Kishida, after meeting the Indian Prime Minister, is en route Ukraine. On the other hand, Xi Jinping says that he is ready to broker a sort of a peace deal, his plan of what a peace proposal should look like. And Vladimir Putin, on the other hand, says, I will let you in on my blueprint of what needs to happen in Ukraine. Give us a sense of how you're looking at these current developments.
Excellent. Kabir, I can't compliment you enough for putting your finger on the right, bang on, I would say, on the issue which everyone should be actually asking. Look, there are multiple stakeholders, but the primary stakeholders in the instant case, I would say, are US to the western side, transatlantic, and China towards the eastern hemisphere. So when I say the transatlantic, let's take it, let's accept the fact that until 24th February 2022, the transatlantic relationship between US and the NATO forces, they had actually fallen apart. So to large an extent, I would say, war in Ukraine has triggered a galvanization of all the stakeholders, the components, just about brought them together, and particularly Germany having changed its dependency on Russia, whether it is oil or the economic resources or any other thing for that matter. So that is a primary thing. Otherwise, it was undergoing change after 1973 agreement. So that is one part. Second part is China. What is the concern of China? Concern of China is Taiwan. They want to integrate Taiwan at the earliest, but by peaceful means. That is immediate or midterm or long-term kind of objective. And alongside China is actually modernizing its armed forces. To large an extent, they have achieved a substantive kind of an improvement, particularly the technological aspect, but it is not matching with the global standard. That is the US. The third component which I would like to highlight in this is that Russia per se cannot be actually left unattended. It is also playing as an important pole in the global order. So despite the fact that, contrary to the fact that everyone thought it will be bled to death in no time, it has managed to survive this particular conflict for more than 1 year. And to my understanding, when I check up the statistics, I still find they have a huge fleet of combat aircraft, almost about 1,511 minus 150, around 1,400 of them. They have a huge armada of tanks. They have got armored delivery vehicles, and name a thing, they have a host of, except for the infantry. The only issue which is going against Russia is lack of trained infantry soldiers, because they have a system of conflict, conscript system. So be that as it may, the issue which is emerging today is that in the present context, how long is this conflict going to last? Well, until the Western alliance stops supplying the arms, weapons, ammunition, surveillance equipment, etc., this conflict will not be brought to any kind of ceasefire, contemplated ceasefire. And to my understanding, China is applying or using Russia as a proxy, as Ukraine is being taken as a proxy by the Western alliance. So here are the two proxies who are validating their concept and so as to delay the conflict breaking out in Indo-Pacific. Because to my understanding and research, China is not prepared to undertake any kind of conflict across the Taiwan Strait and capture Taiwan so as to redeem a historical kind of a pending agenda during his tenure of the third presidential tenure of Xi Jinping. So therefore, it brings me to the fact that, in my opinion, this is just a kind of a demonstration effect or just kind of a gesture which is being made by Xi Jinping. He knows it very well that the peace will not be coming the way he is anticipating, because unless he is able to prevail upon the Western alliance and stop their supply of all these warlike stores, there can be no peace between Ukraine and Russia. Number two, he also knows that as soon as the peace comes about between Ukraine and Russia, the war will be knocking the door of China in the Indo-Pacific, which will be very dangerous, for which China, as on today, is not in a prepared state to face the wrath of multinational forces which are assembling in the first chain, second chain, third and fourth chain of violence. Back to you, Kabir.
All right. Well, Justin, I think Major General put it the right way. It's a war of proxies. There is clearly no end in sight, but we'll have to wait and watch closely how the Indo-Pacific is going to be moving its chess pieces. Of course, another 2 days of Xi's visit left in Moscow. We'll also have to wait for developments about how Fumio Kishida is welcomed in Ukraine as well. I'd like to thank Major General Sudhakar, for joining us on the conversation. Always a pleasure to have you on board, and to you too, Justin. Mind you, folks, you can check out the docu-series on our application. Download that just now, News 9 Plus application for cutting-edge insight and analysis on everything that's happening under the sun. That's all the time we have for you here. Thanks a lot, Justin. Thank you, Major General. We'll catch you right on the other side. More content right on the other side. Don't go anywhere.